Hey guys, Peter Fox here. As you know, we've reached the end of the decade, and a lot of people are making their best movies of the 2010s. Well, I want to have some fun too, and tell you guys my favorite movies of the decade. If you haven't heard of them, maybe you can check them out. Maybe you can agree with me, maybe you can disagree, I don't know. It's fun to make these lists, so I want to make it and show it to you guys. So I may have went a little overboard when I was first making this. I tried to keep it at 20, then I went to 25. Then I added some honorable mentions. And I'm like, maybe 30 will be the definitive spot. And then some other honorable mentions here. So here's how that's going to work. There's going to be two parts to this video. The first part is going to be honorable mentions. I'm going to talk about some great films that I love this year, but they may not be the very, very best. Nothing against these films. I just wanted to be a little more exclusive in this list when I picked the best films of the decade. I didn't want to do a massive number like 100. Heck, I even think 30 is kind of a lot, but whatever, I don't care. So there's about 60 movies altogether. This first video is going to be the first 30 honorable mentions. And the next video is going to be my top 30 best movies of the 2010s. So there you have it. I'm excited. Let's get on with this. Peter Fox's top 30 best films of the decade. Honorable mentions. 60 through 30. Part 1. Whatever. You guys get... Just look at the list. Just look at the list and look at the movies and just see what movies I have. And watch them. Snowpiercer. Bong Joon-ho's first American film is a gritty, bleak, tense action thriller. It stars an amazing international cast of both American, British, and of course South Korean actors. Tilda Swinton never ceases to amaze me, and she is an excellent villain in this. Chris Evans also shines through as the stubborn, perseverant leader who will stop at nothing until he gains freedom for his people. Many of Bong's films circle around politics or social classes, and Snowpiercer does just that. It encompasses so much of our society in a brilliant yet simple premise. A brilliant piece of science fiction disguised as an action movie. In fact, many scenes in this film are just heartbreaking. This is one of those movies where characters aren't just quirky people waiting to get killed off. When someone dies, you're legitimately sad when they die. I was constantly banging on my leg saying, "Damn it, no!" These people's cause is justified. It's something you can get behind and easily get empowered for, too. From the minute the revolution starts off, you're just like, yeah! You're just invigorated and want to see these people succeed and flip over their tumultuous leaders. Some will say this isn't as good as Bong Joon-ho's other films, and, well, I actually agree. But still, I just love it. It's tense, it's brilliant, it's a gritty, suspenseful film that is only slightly entertaining and mostly just challenging. A Separation, an Iranian film directed by Asghar Farhadi. The screenplay for this film is excellent. Every character has a purpose, a reason for the plot. There's quite a few things going on, but the way the script progresses is what's really interesting. It starts out with a divorce, leading up to a court case between charges of murder and cruelty. I guess in a way you could compare it to something like Marriage Story of 2019, although it encompasses more of just divorce and marriage. Every character in this movie has an understandable motive. It's nobody's fault, nobody's the bad guy, but that's what makes the film more interesting and challenging. You genuinely like all these characters and just want to see them get out of it and see their lives go back to normal. But as things start to get worse and worse, you start to worry that something like that may not happen. The film touches on family dynamics and women's rights in the country, and is strangely uplifting in a way I just can't describe. I think someone will find at least one character in this movie to latch onto. Don't miss out on A Separation. You've all heard me gush about South Korean films, but of recent we've had one of the best horror films of the decade come from that country, The Wailing. An eerie mystery horror film that got under my skin in a way no other films usually do. The film deals with demons and sacrilegious themes, as a poor South Korean village tries hard to lift a curse on their land. The film does a fantastic job at playing with your expectations. You never know quite what's gonna happen or what's real, who to trust, who's evil. And that's what truly makes this film terrifying. Our characters are trying to get rid of this curse, but they keep getting tricked and confused, and it just makes things harder for them to know what to do. The music is eerie, the cinematography is dark yet well made. The cinematography gorgeously captures the dark tone and tumultuous strifes of the demons that they must face. This is a must-watch for any horror fans. Holy Motors. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of this film. It's a little weird even for me, but a lot of people really love it. It's probably one of the most enjoyable art house films ever made. The film serves as an homage to different film genres and tropes, but it does it in a fun and very honorable way. In a way, Holy Motors is kind of like the ultimate genre-bending movie. There's a lot you can decipher about this movie, and how it's about art and film. Basically, every one of his appointments are a different movie genre. He lives a rich, lavish life. Cinema becomes his life. But he feels like the public is losing interest in his art. Heck, if that's not enough for you, his name is Oscar. You can at least enjoy one segment of this movie. It's still weird, and I'm not saying this film is for everybody. Some scenes are very interesting to analyze and pick apart, and others are just fun to watch. It's without a doubt one of the most unique films released of the decade, and deserves a mention. I'll make a quick mention of Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight, probably my favorite of his of the decade. This film has really grown on me since I first saw it. Its atmosphere and setting is so powerful, the music done by Ennio Morricone, who won his first Oscar for this, long-awaikedly deserved, is just magnificent. In my opinion, I feel all the things that Tarantino is known for, that he's been working hard to perfect, is finally culminated in The Hateful Eight. A classic whodunit mystery, but set in a Western style, in an isolated cabin in the dead of winter. The dialogue is punchy and humorous. The suspenseful scenes will have you curling your toes and sitting on the edge of your seat. I love all the character interactions and all the themes that are in play, such as race, friendship, and trust. I do see people's complaints with it. It is kinda long, and it is pretty mean-spirited at the same time. But it manages to hold your tension for that long also. Suspenseful yet playful. Limited but grand. For anyone who is unsure about this, I recommend a rewatch. Mommy. A drama directed by Xavier Dolan. What I love about Dolan's films like this and Lawrence Anyways is that they're very straightforward dramas, but he tends to use a lot of experimental and avant-garde techniques to portray them. Lawrence Anyways is full with a lot of surreal and abstract imagery, while Mommy makes great use of the lighting and the aspect ratio. There aren't many films where an aspect ratio can blow you away, but trust me, this one will. It's a very dreary, kind of depressing film, yet it's shot in very colorful and yellow and light. It's very bright, yellow, and orange. While its subject matter is very depressing, there's a lot of uplifting moments in the film too, and I don't think I've ever met anyone who regretted watching it. Things start out rough at first, but you really see these characters spend time together. You see their bond and relationship, and you really start to connect with them. The film even kind of tricks you into thinking it might be a happy movie. And maybe it will, I won't spoil anything. And even in the end, you feel like the characters have really changed and gained something from their experience. Dolan does a lot of unconventional things that people wouldn't think to do in a straightforward drama. But it really works, it enhances the experiences and makes us feel the emotions much more clearer. The Hunt. A truly sad and difficult drama. This film depicts a preschool teacher, played by Mads Mikkelsen, as he's wrongfully accused of sexual assault. This completely ruins him, his life, career, reputation, and it's just tragic to watch this all happen to him. Mads Mikkelsen is an incredibly talented actor, and here he gives maybe his best performance out of all his films. The poster of the film captures one of the most seminal moments. Just look at Mikkelsen's expression as he looks back toward the people who accused him. It's a flurry of every kind of emotion like guilt and remorse, but also anger and confusion, doubting, and just pure frustration. This film isn't going against sexual assault allegations, it's just using it as a means to exemplify the character. He didn't do anything wrong, and it's absolutely tragic just to watch his life fall apart like this. Shot well, acted well, and a very stunning ending in my opinion. The Hunt is a gripping drama. Go see it. Amour, directed by Michael Haneke. It's hard to describe a Haneke film, but you know it when you see it. This film is not quite as disturbing as some of his other films, at least not plainly. What starts out as a typical drama quickly becomes much more disturbing. The film stars two veteran French actors, Jean-Louis Trintignant and Emmanuel Riva. It also stars the great Isabelle Huppert, who you can see in plenty of other great films as well. But what starts out as a slow-burning drama slowly turns into something a lot more disturbing and unsettling. And not exactly in a horrific kind of way. The film analyzes the dark thoughts of ourselves when we're going through traumatic experiences. I feel like the best way to describe Amour is a horrific drama. It's a very slow-paced tale of emotions, but when the emotional journey reaches its destination, it's not pretty. It's about how sadness and depression can bring about these horrible things in us. In that sense, I guess it's one of Haneke's most disturbing films, but in disguise, as it's something we'll all have to relate to eventually. A beautiful but sad movie. Check out Amour, and check out Michael Haneke's films. The Skin I Live In. Pedro Almodovar is probably one of the best screenwriters around right now. His films are scandalous, dramatic, romantic, funny, but always twisted in some way. And The Skin I Live In is no exception. In fact, it's probably the penultimate version of twisted Pedro Almodovar films. To describe the plot of this film would be giving away too much, so I'll try not to go too deep into that. But trust me when I say this, Antonio Banderas has never been better. It's a film of wrong deeds done against people, and you never hate anyone, rather you feel sorry for just about everyone involved in this movie. Strange and downright sick, but honestly, I feel like it's a really engrossing drama. You'll be just as thoroughly entertained and provoked, as much as you are disturbed and off-put. Sondhi, directed by Denis Villeneuve. This film is just devastating. It's often been said about war films that it's hard to make them, or rather, it's hard to make an anti-war film, as people will be caught up in the excitement of the fighting. However, Sondhi found a great way around that. Rather than focusing on battles or soldiers, the film depicts civilians caught in the crosshairs of war. This film doesn't rely too much on violence or shock, but rather family tragedy as the true horrors of war. By the end of the film, everyone is affected, even the villains. Even the villains and terrorists are full of regret at the end of what they've done. Is it an easy film to watch? Not really, but I do think it's an important film, and shouldn't be missed by anyone who's serious about cinema. I Saw the Devil, directed by Kim Ji-woon. So when I said Sondhi doesn't rely on violence or gore, well, this film does. A lot. Honestly, this is probably one of the most brutal films I've ever seen. The soundtrack should be death metal. Actually, I take that back. I wouldn't say I Saw the Devil relies on shock value, but it uses it as a tool, as that's not all the film has going for it. It merely uses that to enhance the story, which is the way shock value should be used. The film pits a road cop against a crazed serial killer after he killed his wife. This is Chow Min-sik's most diabolical performance, as he plays a completely apathetic, murderous psychopath. There's moments where the film shifts between different perspectives of the cop and the murderer, and while you certainly don't like the serial killer, you strangely don't have a problem with watching him and even understanding what he's going through. This film brings out the more human side of a villain and the more monstrous side of a hero. There are a lot of films I hear where they say that it blurs the line between good and evil, but I honestly think that I Saw the Devil is probably the only film I've seen that does that successfully. Not for the weak of heart, but it's exciting and terrifying. Check it out. The Shape of Water. I was so happy that this won Best Picture. I really didn't even see it coming. I don't have much expectations from the Academy. Guillermo del Toro finally showed that he wasn't a one-trick pony and made yet another great film. This film being much more of a romance than a horror though. However, that doesn't detract from any of the themes or the experience. The film is set against the Cold War of the 1950s, and is truly a film about misfits. The film features different characters of different ethnicities, sexualities, disabilities, but of course that's also represented through the Fishman, who is literally a fish out of water in many scenes, and they try to return him home. Okay, I know, it sounds like Guillermo del Toro's Free Willy. Honestly, this is probably one of the most sweetest films you'll see of the decade. Like del Toro's other films, it's just like a fairy tale. Michael Shannon plays an excellent villain, complete with backstory and of course rage. The film is still filled with some violence, and also some commentary on war and society. But basically, this film is about feeling incomplete, feeling outcasted, and feeling in love. This film is recommendable to anyone who's ever felt like a fish out of water. Roma. From Del Toro's buddy Alfonso Cuarón comes a strongly personal tale. Cuarón has made himself out to be one of the best working Mexican directors today. He's not confined to any genre, and is always trying to push the boundaries of what he can do with film. And Roma is just as much a technical achievement as any of his other films. Unfortunately, Lubezki did not do the cinematography for this, but Cuarón stepped in and made it work just as amazingly. The natural light and tracking shots really take you back to this time period. All the textures and details feel so real. The sound design as well just perfectly sets up this environment. Basically what Cuarón was trying to do with this was just tell an autobiographical story about his childhood, and it succeeded fantastically at that. This film makes you feel all the nostalgia and warmth that Cuarón felt at the same time. Nobody since Fellini has been able to do that to me. What can I say? A beautiful film that's as marvelous as it is poignant. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. The biggest cult classic of the decade. Based on the popular comic books and directed by Edgar Wright, who really knows how to do visual comedy. Every scene of this film is just fun to watch, hilarious, and compacted with so much detail. Edgar Wright loves doing things like that. He's almost like the Stanley Kubrick of comedy films. He loves putting in little jokes into the scenes, and making the films even more funny on a rewatch. With Scott Pilgrim, it's nearly sensory overload, but you love it. I think this is actually a very relatable film to a lot of young people, as it's very easy to understand the kind of person that Scott is and what he's going through. Not to mention all the comic book and video game references are just creatively fun. It's amazing to think of how much work truly went into the effects and visuals. This is one of the most enjoyable films you can watch of the decade. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it to anyone who's ever been 20. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is both hilarious and awesome. Silence. Martin Scorsese is one of the few legendary directors who can still make great films. Even classic legends like Fellini or Godard soon fell short after their glory days. He's made kids films like Hugo, thrillers like Shutter Island, and of course his typical biopics like The Wolf of Wall Street and The Irishman. But my pick for my favorite film of his is 2016's Silence. This is Scorsese's most brutal film. Not his most violent, but scenes of this film are really hard to watch at times. The film centers on two Christian priests who go to Japan to find their lost master. On their journey, they witness the true horrors of what Japanese Christians have to go through, and the kind of persecution they suffer. This is the kind of film that anyone who's non-religious can certainly enjoy. It's about faith. It's about what you believe in. It's about others who think they can tell you what to think. It's about others trying to control your thoughts, but truly fighting and standing up for what you believe in. This is a very powerful film, and a good passion project that Scorsese's been wanting to make for a long time. Adam Driver and Andrew Garfield are at their best, and the Japanese cast is pretty fantastic too. A powerful film, this just might be in my top 10 Scorsese. Go watch it. The Forbidden Room.
Hello, I'm Marv. Today we're going to discuss baths.
So I mentioned some other people's guilty pleasures in these honorable mentions, but now I'm going to one of my personal guilty pleasures, The Forbidden Room. While I do think this is a great film, I can understand people not liking it so much. But I really wanted to mention Guy Maddin, a director I greatly admire. The Forbidden Room is tribute to not only films, but stories. Stories that have existed since the beginning of time and how they affect us. This film kind of has ADHD as it jumps from one scene to another, but that's kind of the point. They all feel like different genres as an ode to classic Hollywood, but more so than Holy Motors, where in this, the films seem more specific than just a broad genre. It's an ode to the classic stories of Hollywood that shaped movies as we know it. There's a lot going on in this movie, and it can be very confusing, but I wouldn't call it pretentious or indulgent at all. Some scenes, in my opinion, are actually really funny. Also, its editing makes for some very pleasing visuals throughout. Basically, the film jumps around from story to story, albeit way too much. But I don't know, I have a soft spot for weird films like this, and I just get a kick out of this movie. If it sounds like your thing, then watch it. Although I do recommend watching some other Guy Maddin films first, if not. My Winnipeg is my personal favorite from him. So go watch that, and then go watch The Forbidden Room. The Forbidden Room is visually pleasing, entertaining, and even funny. One director that quickly rose to prominence in the 2010s is Taika Waititi, a director I've grown quite fond of in the past few years. He made a hilarious vampire comedy, Jojo Rabbit, which I greatly liked. I'm going to mention two films that I absolutely adore from him, and I really can't pick which one I like more. Boy and Hunt for the Wilder People. I put these two together because they're actually pretty similar. Both are about New Zealand boys in relation to their father figure. They're mostly comedies, but feature a lot of great parts of character development. Boy doesn't have much of a plot, but that never takes away from the experience. I personally love loose narrative films like this. We get to just live a little with the environment and the characters. Much like real life, we don't really need something huge to go on in order to connect with these characters. At times, it's a very quirky Wes Anderson-style comedy. There's a lot of weird gags and some extra details. And again, just quirky character moments altogether. I think this film is as visually stunning as it is funny. A quirky, sometimes immature and goofy comedy, but again, you always feel for these characters. Their problems are very relatable, and you understand them. But at its heart, the film is innocent and not too sad at all. In fact, it's rather charming. While there isn't much of a plot, it makes up for it in detail of quirky characters and situations. But what Boy is really about is Boy. It really puts you in the mindset of him. He's just so charming and innocent and likable. You can't help but laugh and relate to him. I honestly don't think anyone would be bored by this movie. You'll always be engrossed or laughing. Hunt for the Wilder People is another similar movie, which I greatly adored the year it came out. The movie stars a rap-loving, vandalizing, bridge-spitting, gangster wannabe boy, and his adopted father, played by Sam Neill. This film has a much more traditional narrative than Boy, as it's a lot more tighter and quickly paced. Despite how hard the main character tries to be tough, he's actually a very likable kid character. He loves his dog, which he named Tupac. He's very adventurous, cute, and also is susceptible to any kind of care and nurture. The kid did a really good job performing him too, as the gangster thing is more of a comedic point, and his mannerisms really reflect that of a 12-year-old boy. I absolutely love the relationship between him and Sam Neill. The connection is so believable. Both characters get an equal amount of development. Neither overshadows the other. You're never bored of one character and want the other one to step in. You love both these characters just the same, and are so glad that they make a great connection. I honestly think that was probably the strongest aspect of this film. It's just the relationship and the development of these characters. Waititi shows once again that he's great at cinematography as just as he is with human relations and comedy. Probably one of the few comedy directors that actually gives a crap about cinematography, or making the photography in your film look good. Because some scenes are just beautiful in here. This film is just hilarious and heartwarming and beautiful, and is one of my favorites of 2016. I think Boy and Hunt for the Wilder People are great films to start with, if you want to get into Taika Waititi. Or just great films in general, because that is what they are. Spring Breakers. Harmony Korine is not a director who's afraid to show the grotesque side of humanity. On that note, this just might be the most obscene film on the list. This film doesn't let up in any of its sexual or drug content. Many have criticized this film as just indulging in reckless teen behavior and partying. But what they fail to realize is the film is actually satirizing that. In a weird way, I feel like this movie actually has more of a plot than some of Korine's past films. And also has more of a point and message. That makes it a slightly more accessible watch, and also some parts strangely beautiful. And I won't exaggerate, yeah, most of the scenes are just spring break partiers, and teens doing stupid things like that. But that's just part of Korine's style. He doesn't hold back. He's never afraid to show the true ugly side of America, with all its warts and rawness. Is he making a point, or is it just a fascinating look at a culture? His films are almost quasi-documentary in the way they just portray people, as they usually don't offer commentary, but just shows all these peoples and cultures in all their true spirit. I don't go as nuts for this movie as a lot of other people do, but it's a crazy, ecstasy-filled ride that I think is strangely fascinating in a way. If you want to study some weird people, then check out Spring Breakers, and maybe some of Korine's other films. Long Day's Journey into the Night. The most contemporary director on this list is Bai Gan, who made Kali Blues in 2015, a great film that I think is highly underrated. His next film is also underrated, Long Day's Journey into Night, which I think improved on everything in Kali Blues. Kali Blues was great, but you can tell that he's growing as a director, and it's great to see that. This film features some truly impressive tracking shots, and the film community tracking shots are worshipped. We've seen a ton of them over the years, and it's easy to just throw ourselves onto ones that contain them, but I really think Bai Gan is doing something different with it. There's a tracking shot in this film that lasts almost an hour. This is a film much like Tarkovsky's Mirror or Alain René's Last Year at Marienbad. It's very much a film about the consciousness and the mind. The film works with memories and dreams. After I saw this, I was just thinking about this film for days and just the impact it had on me. It's not really a film to analyze, there isn't any deeper meaning, but it's just a powerful film in the way it portrays memory. And the tracking shots do a great job at bringing back this nostalgia. Bai Gan is looking to be one of the most promising upcoming directors, so seek out his films and support him. Give him the attention he deserves. Leviathan, directed by Andrei Zhyagintsev. Yes, I think I got it right. One of my favorite directors of the decade. Films like The Return and The Banishment are powerful slow-burning dramas and epics, while Elena and Loveless are great character films. The best way to describe Zhyagintstev's films are they're kind of like slow-burning noirs. They're dramas, they're thrillers, but they're also intimate and ponder human sins. His films ponder the greater sins of humanity as they affect the world around them, and the consequences the characters must face. My favorite film from Zhyagintsev is Leviathan, a drama set in a small Russian village. Grand with its cinematography, but intimate with its character development. There's a couple subplots going on in this movie, but it's never confusing. In fact, the subplots really go hand in hand, as they express the same themes and bring the same downfall to our protagonist. It's about how anger and jealousy can eventually bring us down, but it's also about family and corrupt society at the same time. Basically, Leviathan is about how all the smaller problems of the characters affect the bigger world that they live in. How they ruin lives around them, how they ruin the culture, how they ruin themselves. There's a lot of great characters in this film and a lot of great images as well. As the film's title, there is a giant Leviathan skeleton, or whale, which I don't know why, but it's just such a powerful image. And I love how the boy just sits there and ponders it for a while. Leviathan constantly mixes politics and human anguish. Check out Andrei Vyagintstev's films, but definitely see Leviathan. Okay, so I'm gonna cheat twice on this list. The first one I'm cheating with is not a feature length, but a short film called World of Tomorrow, directed by Don Hertzfeldt. Some of you may be familiar with shorts such as Rejected or Billy's Balloon. The director's animation style is very simple, just using stick figures, and his comedic shorts were often things you could find on YouTube. However, other times he's proven himself to be a very profound and experimental director at the same time, being influenced by the likes of Stanley Kubrick and Stan Brakhage. World of Tomorrow is all those things. It's funny, cute, profound, and even just awe-inspiring. Hertzfeldt's future ideas are both presented as absurdly funny, imaginatively wonderful, and even kind of a touch sad at points. The film manages to be funny, sweet, and even prophetic in some scenes that are all too real. This film doesn't dwell too much on social commentary, but some parts are rather tragic when you think about it. Hertzfeldt also shows that he's a master at visual style. Even if his characters are just simple stick figures, the in-camera effects he creates are just breathtaking. I love how the scenes change and everywhere they go as well. Upon careful review of this film, I realized just how much is packed into this short film. It's only about 16 minutes long. There's so many different emotions, styles, and ideas expressed just in this, more than I've seen in 3-hour films or 5-hour films. As I mentioned, the film isn't very long at all, it's a short film, so I really think it's worth your time. Check it out as soon as you can. And check out the sequel also when you get a chance. Hard to Be a God. This film is so close to being perfect. I actually think it's kind of a masterpiece in world building. It's one of the best films I've seen in that regards. The sets, the costumes, everything feels so believable and fleshed out. The camera work is just exceptional. It's extremely fluid and mobile. Getting close-up shots and tracking shots that will be really difficult to pull off, especially in handheld, which is what it looks like most of the time. This is one of the dirtiest films I've ever seen, and I mean that in a physical, gross, disgusting way. Every character in this movie is covered in mud, dirt, grime, blood. They probably haven't washed in years. They've probably soiled themselves. Just about every scene contains snot, vomit, blood, spit, other bodily fluids. It's an incredibly dirty film, and the movie does such a good job at immersing you in that world. If you want to take a bath after this movie, that's a good thing. Especially because I don't think the characters in this movie bathed. The one reason I say it's almost perfect is because I have no idea what the hell is going on in this movie. I've seen fans' reviews of this film, and they don't seem to know what's going on either. However, they say that it doesn't matter. And I respectfully disagree with that. I love non-narrative films, but Hard to Be a God is clearly building on top of a narrative. All these things there are to bring the story to life. There's definitely some abstract films I'm in love with that I don't completely understand, but I'm at least a lot more invested and on board. And I was fairly invested in Hard to Be a God, but there were so many times where I was just so confused. I really don't think anyone truly knows what's going on in this, unless you, I don't know, read the Wikipedia description. Aside from that, though, the film's technical merits are just flawless. If you want to read a plot synopsis before viewing, I'm totally fine with that. And I think this should be viewed at least once in your lifetime, so it's in my honorable mentions. If it was a little more coherent, this film might be higher on the list, maybe even in my top 25. But anyone who loves films needs to view this at least once, I think. Speaking of works I don't quite understand, Uncle Bumi Who Can Recall His Past Lives. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Directed by Apicatapong Weerasethakul. Okay, Joe. Uncle Bumi by Joe is a hard film to describe. There are main characters and there is technically a plot, but the film isn't interested in following that. And that's not a criticism against the movie, I actually think it's in favor of the whole experience. Uncle Bumi takes place in consciousness rather than reality. It operates on dream logic rather than a realistic narrative. But that's what's so great about it. Cinema can show you dreams like this. It can take you into the subconscious mind of people, and you can really experience the ethereal flow. The film is a meditative Buddhist film that reflects on past lives. Like some of the films I previously mentioned, it relies on memories, dreams, the past, even the present, and maybe even the future. I love these kind of films, and I had to watch some of Joe's films again to really understand him, but those are the best kind of films to me. Plenty of my favorites are like that, just like this one. It's not a film that can be easily explained, but it is something that can be felt and understood on a subconscious level. Pretty much every one of his films are like, well, dreams. But they're probably the most accurate representation of dreams. Sometimes weird things happen, sometimes it seems like nothing happens. But that's what dreams are. Realistically, dreams aren't surreal the entire time. Dreams rely on our memories. As someone who's always been fascinated with the idea of dreams, I absolutely love how he portrays his films like that. This film is not just about life, but it's about stories. Apparently the film was shot in 6 different styles, all supposed to be representing different phases of cinema and filmmaking. But it's more than that, it's also about stories. The stories of our dreams, the stories of our memories, the stories of our past, historical stories, fictional stories, any kind of stories. Stories of past lives. And if we resonate with a story so much, does that become a part of us? Does that become our life? If we become reincarnated over and over again, it's an endless cycle. We become someone, we become everyone. So when we hear a story, is their story our story? Is this person our relative? Is this person us? I don't completely understand everything about this movie. I've only seen it twice, but I'm really looking forward to whatever Joe puts out next. I find this style of filmmaking so fascinating, and I really want to unravel Uncle Bumi some more. But in order to do that, you gotta see it a first time, so check it out real soon. So I was upset to find out that Enter the Void came out in 2009, because that really would have made my list. Would have been fairly high too, because I really love that movie. But I feel like the best substitute is its most recent film, Climax. An unadulterated, relentless film about a truly bad drug trip. Gaspar Noé has constantly expressed how he hates the typical movie formula. He wants films to give people new experiences, and that is exactly what he does with every one of his films. It's hard to really explain the structure of Climax because it is so unique. I'm gonna say it's not an enjoyable one, as the film is mostly a horror film. It's a weird mix of dance, horror, psychedelic, art house, and is a disturbing yet potent film. After some cool dance sequences, the film puts you through hell. The film starts with the ending credits just to get it out of the way. Don't worry, you didn't watch the film backwards. Noé is always trying to be innovative, whether he be having dance scenes in a horror film, or showing off impressive trick shots with his camera. You really can't compare Gaspar Noé films to anything else out there. Climax ought to be called Anxiety the Movie, because that is what you will be feeling throughout this entire uncomfortable, unsettling feature. But I mean that in a good way. It's a powerful experience that I'm certainly glad I saw. Thank God for Gaspar Noé. Black Swan, directed by Darren Aronofsky. I saw this film just at the right time. Just as I was finally getting into movies, this film came around and completely helped shape my view of what cinema should be. It helped start my love for psychological thrillers, character studies, reflective camera work, and gorgeous cinematography. The film plays around with identity, but it's more about the good and bad inside of us. Our protagonist struggles with what kind of person she is. Is she a good person or is she a bad person? She's very shy and lives with her overprotective mother, so it's easy to see what kind of psychology that might cause. Many scenes in this film are truly haunting and unnerving, and it's easy to get inside our character's head and feeling. She's not a bad person, or is she? Well, okay, she doesn't seem like a bad person on the surface, so it's easy to understand her fear and worry and all this insanity going on. It's hard to describe this film even more. Many of the scenes you're not even sure if they really happen, and they might just be inside the main character's head. But this all just makes for a fantastic psychological identity horror film. But in all of Nina's terror, perhaps the thing she's really afraid of is herself. I still have a soft spot for this movie, no matter what your thoughts on Aronofsky are, and if you haven't seen it, I recommend checking it out. Speaking of the best horror films of the decade, comes The Lighthouse, directed by Robert Eggers, one of the most recent films on the list. Now, I actually think calling this movie a horror film is slightly misleading. It's eerie, tense, and creepy, but it's also very dramatic, humorous, and allegorical in a lot of parts. fact, I think most of what we're watching is meant to be metaphorical than literal. This film just came out, so people are still trying to analyze what everything means. Who this character represents, what this symbol is. What did that final shot mean? On the bright side, this isn't a film that gets bogged down by any of that. Just about every second of this film is entertaining. You have some striking black and white cinematography, amazing performances, Willem Dafoe should have been nominated, and some truly tense moments. Because you're not entirely sure what's happening, just about everything around you is meant to be creepy in a way. I love how much effort he put into the dialogue and just making this time period feel real. Despite our characters and dialogue feeling so authentic, I really don't think this island is meant to be anything that we're supposed to believe it is. I think I might do an analysis of this film myself in the future. It's one of the most recognizable films of the year and many people's favorites of the year, so I highly recommend going to see it. Very entertaining, very strange, very creepy. What could it possibly mean? Well, you gotta see it to have an interpretation of your own. Anomaly, directed by Charlie Kaufman and Duke Johnson. Charlie Kaufman is one of the most originally imaginative filmmakers working today. His films are all creative but very beautiful. They're very out there concepts, but they're very brilliantly unique and original. He doesn't just make up random things off the top of his head, he really thinks about these things, and just how it relates to humanity as well. One of his most human films, so human it even hurts, Anomaly. The main character of this film is just so recognizable to me, I found myself uncomfortable, in a good way. He's a depressed asshole, but the film starts to dive in and show that it's kind of his fault. People suffer from different kinds of depressions. I don't think this is an accurate representation of everyone's depression, but it's good to see a character study of a selfish jerk, and that maybe he's the reason he's depressed. Someone like BoJack Horseman, or Birdman. Some parts of this movie are funny, some parts are all too real depressing, but what really gets me is the stop-motion animation. I don't want to give away too much, but I love what they do with the character designs, and just how they use that to represent what Michael is going through. It's a brilliant choice that could only be done in stop motion. There's also a lot of long take scenes. You know, every film buff's turn on. But what makes these even more impressive is they're done in stop motion. Any mistake made could mean months of rework. Great animation and an unforgiving look at selfishness and depression. It's one of the great films to analyze depression and self-destructiveness. You may not smile after seeing this movie, but if you relate to it, I think the film is worth it. Youth. Paolo Sorrentino is one of the few Italian directors who's actually known today. He's made some great movies, such as The Great Beauty, a homage of La Dolce Vita. Personally, I think Youth is his best film. Michael Caine and Harvey Keitel have never been better. Personally love seeing them in these roles, after they haven't done a whole lot of great things in a while. What proceeds is a comedy drama about old age. Something that's been done before, yeah, but there is something about the presentation of this that really makes it special. Mostly from the performances and cinematography. They all work together to make this a very sweet film. Albeit sad sometimes, this is one of the few films on the list that isn't depressing. Youth is funny, sad, sweet, and has great cinematography. Funny and earnest, no matter how old you are, I think you'll enjoy Youth. Nocturnal Animals. I personally love this movie. Perhaps the strongest aspect of this film is the acting. Every performer in this film is at their A game. They just bring their best. Aaron Taylor-Johnson is good, Michael Shannon is of course great, Amy Adams and Jake Gyllenhaal are two of the best actors of this generation. They are unflinchingly good. And between the two, I can't decide who I like more. The plot basically revolves around a story within a story, in which a woman receives a novel from her ex-husband. The novel expresses his life, but also reflects hers at the same time. As she reads the novel, she begins to rethink her life and her choices that she's made. The visuals are deeply metaphorical, and the film mainly covers the themes of love and art. There's a lot packed into this movie, so really, I just recommend you watch it. Some people may have missed this movie the year it came out, but don't. Nocturnal Animals. Not one, but two stories, like no other. Nightcrawler. A dark neo-noir film that shows the true seediness of capitalism. Jake Gyllenhaal once again gives one of his best performances as one of the most vile, despicable human beings ever put on screen. A sociopath who will do anything to make a living or succeed. You could say this film is a lot like other classic noir films, such as Ace in the Hole or Sweet Smell of Success. Films that take unlikable characters and satirize something about society. Nightcrawler covers topics of the media, capitalism, all while exploring the sociopathic tendencies of our protagonist. A truly disgusting film, and if you think so too, then the film did its job. It did its job criticizing success, and the things people have to do in order to get it. Few filmmakers have made such a name for themselves as Wes Anderson. He's been making films since the late 90s, but as of recent, he's really been perfecting his style. I have 2 picks from him of the decade, and that's Moonrise Kingdom and The Grand Budapest Hotel. Before, while I had mixed feelings about Anderson, Moonrise Kingdom is the film that really changed my mind. It made me like him a lot more. A whimsical, innocent film about 2 runaway children. Anderson takes the concept of lovers on the run and gives it his own unique take, with quirky comedy, colorful sets, and plenty of heart. I don't know what it is, but I just get so wrapped up in the adventure of Sam and Susie running off on their own. Maybe it's just because it's a fantasy every kid had, or maybe because you like these characters, you see their home lives, you see how lonely and troubled they are, and you really just want them to run away and be happy together. They're a couple of misfits, so it's easy to get invested in their story, and understand why they're on the run. What I also love about this film are the adult characters. While they're technically the antagonists, they're never really portrayed in that way. Anderson handles them as actual characters with their own problems. They're just as flawed as the kids, yet the film isn't condescending toward them. It really sets things into perspective as the flawed adults quarrel while their children go missing. But the cast is excellent, all the characters are performed very well. Even Bruce Willis, who hasn't been in a good movie in, 20 years, is actually surprisingly okay. This is such a lovable movie, and I think everyone can see it. Grab the family, bring some kids, enjoy a nice, heartfelt, funny movie. Next we have what many consider Anderson's best film, The Grand Budapest Hotel. This is when Anderson really got down his style and perfected it. You could call this film an adventure comedy, influenced by classic films, classic theater, classic novels. There's something about the novelty of the costumes and the sets that really evokes something like, I don't know, like some kind of old British serial pulp story. Or it actually makes me think of Clue in a strange way, even though it's just a game. There is something so iconic about Anderson's visual style and his costumes. They're very theatrical in a way. I absolutely love the sets and all the scenery. Anderson made great use of miniatures when he went to some of the more difficult sets to film in. This is just a big movie, not only because it's Anderson's most successful film to date, but it has a huge epic scope and a huge epic cast. This is probably the largest cast Anderson has ever worked with. Friends new and old join him to make his passion project. This film reminds me of something like The Great Race, or The Lawrence of Arabia of comedies. The more I think about it, Grand Budapest Hotel is a great movie because it has everything that makes a movie great. It's an adventure, it's a comedy, it's a tragedy. It has great set pieces, visual design, the tone is consistent through all this. Like other of Anderson's films, the characters are very well developed and you feel deeply for these people. There's a lot of tragic, dark humor that plays out as well, and whether it's meant for deadpan comedy, dry humor, or to actually make you feel sad, it all works. It never feels out of place or anything. This is such a fun film, as are most of Anderson's films. Another film that I think was good he just did is Isle of Dogs, another stop-motion animated film, like Fantastic Mr. Fox. His films are very well made, but they're very accessible to people who may not be into extreme kinds of cinema. It's a fun movie that's easy to enjoy and appreciate. Grab your friends and enjoy some of Anderson's colorful and comedic films. He's already made a name for himself as one of the most recognizable directors of this decade, with his incredibly distinct visual style, and his constant dry deadpan humor. Honestly, I think anyone who's getting into films should try checking out Wes Anderson's films first. It's a great filmography to start with for any newcomers. The Revenant, directed by Alejandro Iñárritu. The last of the 3 amigos to get mentioned on my list. Will he be the highest? We'll see. I don't care what people say about this movie. I know it's gotten a little backlash as being overrated, from people saying, oh, it's just a movie about Leo crawling on the ground for 2 hours. Well, I say, anyone who knows anything about film should at least be able to respect this movie for the cinematography, the Tarkovskian influences, and the simple naturalistic themes. Yes, on the surface, most of the scenes are just Leo trying to survive in the forest, but if you were able to pick up on any subtleties, you would know what it was building up to. This film is just gripping. From the very first scene, there's a very brutal, violent battle, and it really helps to set up this environment and time period as just how dangerous it really is. Leonardo DiCaprio's character is left in the wilderness, injured, fleeing from animals, cruel nature, and Native Americans. This film is just gripping in how intense it is. To say it lightly, DiCaprio's character did not have a nice time trying to get back home. I mean, he can hardly stand up for most of his journey. He has to catch fish in the freezing water, has to seal up wounds with gunpowder. This poor guy can just never take a break. The filmmaking itself is truly jaw-dropping and has to be admired by anyone who loves films. I'm sorry to say it like that, but come on. This film was shot in the dead of winter, in the middle of the forest. The cast and crew were freezing to death every day. But with the incredibly skilled and powerful cinematography of Emanuel Lubezki, the scenes are just amazing to watch. This is probably one of the few films in existence where I watch this movie and think, how the hell did they get that shot? Almost every scene in this film looks like it was difficult to pull off, which only raises the stakes for our protagonist. Tracking shots are hard enough, but when you have to coordinate objects flying, things falling, people moving in synchronized, coordinated ways, put that on top of what I already mentioned about the filmmaking, and you have one of the hardest films to make. With The Revenant, the filmmaking is not just done well, it's done remarkably well. But even past that, the natural lighting and just the sheer beauty of everything just grips you, just like the suspense and DiCaprio's struggles with trying to survive. I really love what this film has to say about nature. It's almost like a tough Tarkovsky film, where Tarkovsky taught about being malleable and made beautiful films. This movie is just tough nuts, but sometimes the film actually does manage to be beautiful. What it says about death and life, and just how that affects our character after he goes through everything. You see him by the end of the film and you know just how much he's changed, and just how much this experience has affected him. It's just as enlightening, but more rewarding. I have no idea why so many people think this movie is overrated. I have nothing but praise for it. It's still such a special film to me, and I really think anyone who hates it should try reviewing it. If you missed this film for some reason, don't skip out on it. Go see The Revenant as soon as you can. Certified copy. This decade, we lost one of the most pleasant and profound voices in world cinema, Abbas Kiarostami. Without a doubt, one of my favorite filmmakers. Every one of his movies was like a painting or a poem, and no matter what his project was, I always got something out of it. He can be compared to someone like Robert Bresson. His films are very simple and minimalistic. He often limits himself in these films. However, Kiarostami is a genius and knows how to use these limitations to his advantage. He uses these to say more profound things than any bigger film could say, and shows parts of humanity that not even the deepest philosophers could have unraveled. He's made quite a few films over the years and this decade, but my pick for my favorite film from him is Certified Copy. This film stars everyone's favorite French actress, Juliette Binoche, and Italian opera singer William Schimmel in his first film role. The two star in this poignant art house film about two people spending the day together. However, halfway through the film, it suddenly shifts into something different. If you're paying attention, you might notice it. In fact, I was actually confused when I first watched it, so I'm just giving you a warning there. If you're confused about any of the character motivations or their backstories somewhere in the middle of the film, just know that that's intentional. This film performs the feat of being beautifully visceral, yet also thought-provoking. You enjoy being with these characters, you love hearing them talk, you love hearing them get to know each other. You really get to know these characters, and it's a joy watching them grow. Yet the film has an interesting thing to say about copies or replicas or anything like that. It's almost like that Greek tale of the boat that leaves port and then comes back with all new parts. Is it the same new ship? That's kind of what this film covers, but with people. It's about the experiences we gain from meeting new people. Are we the same? Are we made for the better? Who knows? Certified Copy is a fascinating film to think about, but it's also just a beautiful film to relax and enjoy. As are most of Kiarostami's films. Go watch Close Up, the Coker trilogy, Like Someone in Love, and 24 Frames. Kiarostami was definitely one of the most sincere voices in cinema. Rest in peace, good sir. Thank you for all the great films. Inside Llewyn Davis, directed by the Coen brothers. Personally, one of my favorite Coen brothers films. They've made quite a few this decade, but this is their best without a doubt. The film offers a character study of a folk singer in the week of his life. The film takes us back to the folk era 1960s, as we follow Llewyn as he does, well, pretty much nothing. But I love that. I love when films don't need a tightly written plot or any kind of grand conflict in order to get me interested in it. We're just watching someone's life, and that's interesting to me. Llewyn struggles with problems such as grief, depression, guilt, anger, selfishness, narcissism. What is a character study of a not-so-likable person is actually a great reflection of folk music as a whole, and what it's meant to people over the years. Oscar Isaac is a fantastic actor, and this just might be one of his best roles. John Goodman and Adam Driver are great for the short time they're in it. I don't know, I just love these kind of small adventure character studies. He just goes around life as awkwardly hilarious things happen to him, but also very tragic things too. Maybe there is a bit of humor, but it's much more of a drama. We watch Llewyn during all his mishaps and misadventures, trying to find his way through life. He's a bit unlikable, but we get to know him better and understand him. It becomes a much more introspective film. I absolutely love slice-of-life films like this, and I think Inside Llewyn Davis does a great job. I love the visuals of this film too. It's a different style than most other Coen Brothers films. It's very low-lit and kind of dark at times, possibly to reflect the whole urban indie feeling that the film is going for, and just the environment that Llewyn Davis lives in. Despite being a recent entry, I would put this in my top 5 favorite Coen Brother films. One of their best, definitely. If you love loose narrative character studies like this, with humor and tragedy all thrown in there, almost being a long folk song of itself, then I think you should check out Inside Llewyn Davis. It's as simple, bare, and heart-wrenching as a folk song itself. And if you haven't seen any of the other Coen Brothers films, well, what's wrong with you? Well, maybe you're just getting into films. That's okay. But check out the Coen Brothers films. They're a great place to start, so see their movies. And that concludes part 1, the honorable mentions. Stay tuned as I'll put out part 2 very soon. I'm working on it at the same time as this, so it's not going to be all that much later. So yeah, stay tuned for my top 30 films of the decade. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Poet Boy is coming soon, so tell your friends to subscribe, tell your friends to share it with your friends, hit the bell, hit the thumb the bell. I don't care what you do. Just like me, please. I'm very lonely, guys. I'm so lonely. Just like me. I have no friends. Like me, please. Please like my YouTube channel. Please. Please tell me I have good film taste, guys. Please. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you soon.